welcome to Show Studio. It's our last roundup panel of the day. We're going to be talking about the autumn-winter 15 couture shows. There's lots to talk about this season. I think there was some kind of new developments in terms of sort of personnel, so who's designing for who, lots of kind of catwalk theatre, as always, as we get at the couture. A fair amount of controversy as well. Obviously Fendi did a big fur show which caused a lot of debate and discussion. There was also kind of, I think, a lot of commentary around the nature of showmanship. I think there was some criticism of Chanel for doing such a big kind of casino show, so much to dive into. I've got a great set of panellists with me who can kind of help unpick the history of the shows and all the opinions that surrounded them, which is fabulous, including my boss, so I have to be well behaved on today's panel. But before we kick off, I'll let you guys just introduce yourselves, starting with you, Sho.
I'm Shonagh Marshall and I'm a curator at Somerset House.
I'm Harriet Quick and I'm an editor and journalist.
And I'm Nick Knight and I'm the director of Show Studio.
So serious.
Start that way.
So I'm going to start with a kind of open question, which kind of relates to the Chanel show, which I think we're about to have a little look at, which is about kind of the nature of theatre and showmanship within these shows, because I think that's something that kind of underpinned everything we saw, and it also underpinned it in quite an interesting way, where showmanship extended to kind of beyond the catwalk. Valentino did this fantastic spectacle in Rome where they flew people out and they organised tours of Rome as a city. So this idea of kind of the show and theatre and performance, it's kind of extended beyond just the fashion. And is that a good thing? Does it show that catwalk shows are kind of thriving and continuing and are more exciting than ever, or does it suggest that we've run out of things to talk about and designers are kind of trying to distract people with things that aren't actually anything to do with the clothes? Do we love theatre or do we hate it? Big question. Sho, what do you think?
Well, I haven't actually seen this. I'm seeing this video. I think it's interesting when it supports the matter at hand. Yeah. And I mean, I know we're talking about Chanel, but I thought Valentino was really interesting. I mean, we can talk more about it later on. But the way that they arranged that was about their influences, their inspirations, rooted in history or literature in the library. Also exhibiting archive pieces. I think to see that first and then see the show, would you not then understand the objects more, the clothing more? So I thought that was quite nice. But I don't know, the casino's kind of fun. I don't know what that means to the clothing is my question really.
I think that's a really smart point you make, because it's very different types of theatre, isn't it? I think the Valentino one, as you say, they were organising tours for kind of 700-800 people around the city of Rome. Some of them were going, to wonderful historic sites, and then they had, as you said, the show featuring archive pieces. That's a very different kind of theatre. I mean, it's just as much about kind of decadence and entertaining, but it's very much about informing people, whereas this is kind of very much an add-on. Yeah. What were your guys' take on the Chanel show? You got some insider information, didn't you?
Yeah, I spoke to Amanda Harlick last night about the show, which she explained it beautifully to me. Yeah. It's partly to showcase this incredible collection of diamonds. Is it Uribe? Have I got that right?
I think so.
Sure, I'll get told off if I get it wrong. But anyway, who did a collection in 1932 with Chanel of diamonds, who completely revolutionised sort of haute jewellery at that time, and scandalised the sort of haute jewelleries of Place Vendôme. Yeah. So Carl was bringing back this collection to show it off. Yeah. He put it on women dressed in black velvet, which of course is how you get your diamonds when you get your diamonds in black velvet boxes. So that's what's going on in the middle. Then going on around the outside, of course, is a collection. So it's almost a collection within a collection. Yeah. And there's a nice little play on casino things, because the first, I think, 8 dresses are 3D printed. So they're actually sintered out. So, 3D scanning and 3D printing is very new, and the first 8 dresses are completely printed. So something that would take perhaps a year normally to do by hand was printed out by a machine. It's a very new concept, and it's a very new way of working. There's a little pun, because 3D, which means 3D, also means 3 dices in French. So there's some sort of link to the gambling going on there. And it's the show sort of Carl's, all the people around the tables were Carl's friends and his inner circle. Yeah. So I think there are links there. And once Amanda started explaining it to me, and started explaining the dresses to me, then you really understand why the shows look like the way they do and what they're presenting. I think the whole idea of making these shows into spectacles is very important. We live in an age which is everything's instant. So people are seeing the shows live, or they're seeing them pretty much live. So the idea of making a spectacle which you can see online is very important now. The idea of showmanship, of course, is something that a lot of the designers have naturally within them. And I think doing these big shows and these beautiful pieces of fashion theatre, something that Lee McQueen did, John Galliano did, people who Hussein Shalom, I think they're an incredibly important way of articulating the fashion. I don't think they're ever just frivolous. I don't think they're ever just stuff for the sake of it. They always take the themes that designers worked on and poured their hearts into for the last sort of 6 months or so. So I think they are important ways of expressing the clothes and expressing what's behind the thought behind the collection. It's very hard to get across some of the detail that's in those dresses and to expand the sort of the ideas behind them just by putting on a catwalk where they walk up and down. You really don't get that. I mean, I've had the privilege of being able to be with people like John Galliano who sat down and explained to me the collection and say, well, this is about this or this is about this new technique thing. Which of course you never hear that. And so any more information you can get, I think, in ways, and doing a show which is a way of sort of, if you want, giving more background information to it, is really helpful. But they are great pieces of fashion theatre. I think there is a rise, and of course, a designer like Carl has got the finances to do that. That's an incredible piece of theatre. And they were really gambling in the middle there.
That's quite amazing that they were actually gambling. It is a justification for the continued relevance of the fashion show as well, which is a kind of new debate around fashion theatre, is kind of, I think the fact that these can become kind of wonderful events that do, and we were talking on our men's panel this morning about the Givenchy show, the menswear show, which actually did feature couture looks, so it's kind of relevant to this discussion. And they had it in, it was a different kind of fashion theatre because there was quite a great set, but it wasn't too kind of fantastical. But they had it in an open air space, which was kind of circled off, so you were very much in or you were out. But there was a huge crowd kind of pressed up against these walls looking at the show, and it was quite wonderful. And we talked about actually how great it was to see a kind of old school fashion show where everyone wanted to be in there and you were kind of battling to get in. And we talked about how it made you feel lucky to be able to show again. And I wonder if that's something that is interesting about catwalk theatre, is whether it's a way in which the show can kind of remain relevant. I think we're seeing that with the cruise shows. The reason there's so much theatre is to kind of justify the existence of a show.
I think there's another element here which is really important within the bigger world of luxury, the idea of experience or experientialness being really, come to surface and become a, very driving force about why we might want to buy luxury. Why do we? It's the experience of it. So I think the theatre within the Haute Couture shows and the ready-to-wear and the resort is really bringing that home. That, it could be a wonderful experience, and actually, whether you're seated in the audience or watching it from afar, you get a sense of a bigger fantasy going on. And I think that the sense of experience is highlighted throughout it.
I think so, and I think the smartest designers, it's when that show, whether it's from the props or kind of just like the theme of the season, is when it does filter down to a point where the consumer understands it, so it ends up being, in shop windows or that kind of thing. And that's really interesting, is those connections. Do we think it was, what's our take on the way Chanel do it? Because often Karl Lagerfeld does get criticism for his shows being, slightly controversial or bad taste at the particular times that he does them. There was all that kind of talk around when he did the protest, which was a time where there was very genuine protest happening in the world, and then this, when there's kind of huge economic strife and problems, to have a casino. Or do we think that's kind of,
it's quite provocative, really, isn't it? Because I was struggling thinking, I don't find casinos very glamorous, but within this context it's made, a wonderful fiction with a cast of characters. And I was thinking, how does that casino metaphor, how will that go into Chanel shops in China where gambling of this sort is outlook, it's banned. You have to go to Macau. It's just, it has a sort of a poignancy, I think. Because I think a lot of people would think, casino, gambling, that's vulgar.
But maybe that's part of, I mean, it felt to me, this collection, even though when in some ways you think casino, you think old school kind of luxury, you think kind of dressing up, and it's quite a formal thing. Actually, I feel there was a lot of parallels between this and the shopping centre show, where it was kind of quite witty and a bit more playful and less kind of, it was a bit irreverent rather than dramatic, if that makes sense. But what do we think of the actual fashion? Maybe that's the problem with these kind of shows, is we've spent so long talking about, maybe that is part of the...
I'm personally, it's so hard to tell from the poor imagery that we get given for this. I think that's the really strange thing for me. There's a lot of the designers I know get very upset that we have to review from still imagery, where of course this is all about a piece of clothing and movement. It's all about seeing the back and the turn and hearing the sound of the material, and the designers will be the first people to say, this is so important to us. Then why the hell don't they say to their brands, live stream? Because then at least you get a bit more. So that live streaming is so cheap, so affordable, so easy to do now. Why aren't all the brands doing it just as a matter of course?
It is really strange, isn't it? It's interesting. I find it really interesting what you're saying about kind of how the theatre, the showmanship can kind of serve to back up what the collection is about. And it got me wondering, is there an issue of communication? And we often talk about it on these panels about fashion people just kind of talking to themselves. And sometimes I do feel that with the shows is that information is not put across adequately to someone who might be interested. I thought it was really smart when Valentino, it's such a simple thing to do, when they started writing the number of hours of work that went into each thing. It's so simple, but people found that really engaging, and they kind of would tweet it for each piece. And you do think with Chanel it would have been fantastic if they had kind of made it really clear what all those nuances and codes were about. And part of that does come through doing things like streaming, because when you see it, you're right, when you see it in flat images you miss all of that.
I wonder if it's because a lot of the designers presumed that this, back in the day where actually the people reviewing it were journalists, and therefore would know that, and would also then go backstage or to the showroom and see the piece of clothing afterwards. So they're really still catering for that sort of audience. They're not catering for the actual audience that they have, which is an audience of people who are just watching it online, who don't know all that. They don't know how many hours or how much it costs or the incredible work or the ideas. None of that is available to them. So I do think there's a certain amount of journey the designers have to go through to educate the people who are watching their shows. So they're no longer talking to 300 journalists. Now they're talking to people across the world. And I think it's not that they should do it just because it's better for them. It's incredibly interesting. Some of the things that they're doing, making dresses from computer scans now. It's an incredible bit of sci-fi. It's similar in a way, that when Chanel was around, she was making dresses that looked like skyscrapers. It's a bit that sort of harking back to that idea of embracing modern ways.
Of course.
But those things are fascinating if you know them. But where do you get to hear that?
Exactly.
I spoke to Alex Fury and Amanda Harlick, so I get to hear that. But most people don't.
Which is why things like the fashion exhibition, and also things like we talked a lot when we actually did the Dior panel about films like Dior and I, why they're actually really important, because I think they give you a sense of kind of actually the makeup that goes behind these shows. But I think it is quite impenetrable, the world of couture, and actually it is a kind of medium where you need that explanation, which brings us right back to Valentino in the way, which is obviously something they were trying to do. But there's always a cynical side in me where I think things like offering a dinner to 700 people who've been flown to a city, to Rome, to review your show, it gets into that awkward thing about whether criticism can be genuine or valid I think it's a particular topic with the cruise shows when people are being flown across the world. Is it something you think about as a writer? It's very hard to critique when you're being kind of taken there.
Paid for, you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's different policies for different newspapers about whether one can accept those trips anyway, for a start. I think with the Valentino show, I mean, it looks absolutely incredible and beautiful, and it's obviously a celebration for X many years for the two of them. It's 10 years, isn't it? Yeah. So odds on that it was going to be great.
I think it's 5 years, not 10 years.
Yeah.
I think it's 5 years, sorry.
Yeah, so, and the opening of the big HQ in store there. So I think, you're going to be in a pretty amazing environment. But I think it's that idea as well. It's like, well, how would that work if that had actually been in Paris? But you've got so much more, and a tour and exploratory of Rome. I mean, quite an amazing setup of experiences again. Which is a kind of amazing thing to do, and at huge expense.
It's hard, isn't it? Because on one hand, these shows that happen kind of pop up around the world, like things in Tokyo or in Asia or whatever, or a lot of the shows that have happened across America outside of New York, it feels really modern. It feels like a great way to show fashion, and it's moving out of that tired kind of four cities setup. But then the other hand is it's so difficult, because then you get into this strange case where it's kind of exacerbating other problems in fashion, like there not being genuine criticism, and there not being kind of that brands kind of very much buying the support of journalists. And it's really hard, I think, to find a way where that's going to become a kind of sustainable, good method of showing, because at the moment I think it is strange with these big, particularly with the cruise shows, when you see everyone kind of get flown and get gifted so much stuff. It's really a strange thing to watch it kind of unravel, but I think it's the nature of fashion.
It does feel slightly odd if you're sort of, you're gifting things to people whose job it is to criticise your work.
Yeah, it's just really weird.
It's a bit like buying the criticism.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not so simple, but it doesn't feel comfortable. So, that sort of, just that relationship. I mean, all art forms and fashion, in my opinion, is an art form, need a critical forum, and a free critical forum. So I think the idea that you buy the critical forum and you treat it nicely, you put it in great hotels with
dump it down,
is to sort of keep it down a little bit. And I don't think I have anything to fear. I'm not quite sure what the difficulty is here. Most of these designers, the ones that do couture, are incredibly talented. Are doing amazing pieces of clothing. These are just absolute visions that are coming down the catwalk. So why the fear that they will then get criticised?
Because I kept thinking when you were both talking that this may be such a simplistic thing to say, but if your work's good enough, why worry so much? In a way, like I think the presentation, I think it's something that you going back to what I originally said about adding to the garments and their story and their legacy, being shown round where you be inspired and where you spend your time doing historical research. Well, how amazing to see those things, and then to associate that with the clothes. You'll have learned, you'll have taken a step outside of that bubble of taking your seat that's got your name on it. You'll have seen the world in a different way, and Rome as a stage for Valentino, it is the pulse of that brand. It is everything. It means, well, it always has done. It meant such a lot, and to return there, it's very poignant, and it's quite romantic, and almost you don't need to pay for the opinion if the work is as beautiful as it is. And I think that the cruise thing is really, I find, very interesting, because from an outsider, I'd never go to a cruise show, or I am merely a punter in that sense, unless I'm studying a said designer's work or a certain vein that touches upon that. But that to me felt really weird and new, and I know lots of people wrote articles, and I read them about the theatre returning and this blurring, and I was actually, I don't know if I say it, but I was talking to Shonagh today about this, which is always really weird, and she was talking about the jet set and how that became void because everyone could travel, and so what are these luxury experiences? And they are things that everybody can't have, and that's what you were saying about the fantasy and what you're buying into. And I think it is endearing, and I mean, wow, I would have liked to be on those trips. They look really fun, and they're all mates, everyone's friends. They spend all these periods of time hopping around the world, but ultimately it's to showcase the garments. So.
But I think it's really smart what you say about that jet set thing, because I think the cruise shows and
Shonagh's
but what Shonagh said, borrowed opinions. But I think the couture shows have always served as that, haven't they? You have the press sat there, but you also have the clients sat there, and I think the cruise shows have offered another kind of string to big houses' bow in kind of thanking or acknowledging their big shoppers. They invite them along, they fly them out there, they sit them front row, and you're right, it's that kind of luxury experience. It's that kind of offering of a thank you. It's kind of the extension of a nice box with a ribbon tied around it. And
it is about experience now. Everyone wants an experience. You see that so often with brands staging huge exhibitions, sometimes not with the curator at the helm. It really is a marketing exercise, which is so interesting because it helps tell the story, and I think that's ultimately a communication question. But also the mileage you'll get out of Palm Springs or Cardin's house. Oh my gosh, all those images going all around the world by really influential people through social media. That's it's not new, but it's newish, and I think that instead of doing those advertising images where you'd spend your money, I think that seems really fascinating, certainly in terms of exhibition. These become little exhibition, little ways to exhibit new ideas, and
it must be exciting for you to see kind of I guess like curating brought into the realm of the catwalk, as we saw at Valentino, where people are kind of thinking more along those lines.
I think that was a smart. I really liked it, and it was beautifully orchestrated. To see some of the images were absolutely amazing. The way that the clothes interacted in those spaces, and I think that is bringing in a kind of curatorial element to something that's live, actually. You know. And vice versa, you know, in the institutions we are doing more, you know, happening. Doug Aitken's Station to Station at the Barbican. That's live, dynamic, active.
Or V&A Fashion in Motion.
Fashion in Motion. You know, there's been a real big shift in terms of how the events or things that you interact with for a much shorter period of time can really have lasting impression and help you think about things, or culturally, you know, extend your information that you're giving to people. So,
Should we talk about? I'm interested in some of the points that you brought up, Nick. It made me think about kind of the interplay between fashion and art, and we've talked about kind of exhibiting. And it seems apt to talk about the Victor and Rolf show, because I don't know if you guys all had a look, but it was quite fantastic in terms of it was literally the artwork frames broken up and then used to make dresses. So it was like the models became kind of living works of art, but kind of it was kind of a witty collection. But also, I think one thing that's interesting with that collection is because obviously Victor and Rolf stopped doing the ready to wear now, and they're just doing the couture, and I think this point that they were making about fashion and art extends to different elements of their practice, and one of them being the way that this is being sold, which is that each season, it happened last season and it's happened again this season, I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, it's Han Nefkens, who's big art collector, has pledged to buy a piece, and which he then donates to the museum, which I'm not going to be able to pronounce.
Boyman.
Say it?
Just Boyman.
Boyman. Okay, there we go. That's easy. Which I thought was quite interesting, because it's offering a very different idea of what couture can be. That it's about couture almost created just as an object of art for the exhibition, which it feels like this is. I can't imagine many clients commissioning one of these. Did you find this show interesting because of that kind of practice?
I mean, I always had this quite staunch view that fashion and art as practices are just different. They're just different things. And I think this is really kind of murky terrain, and I don't quite know how to speak about it, in the sense that it's not meant for the body other than just this one time, and then it will go on a mannequin, which is a hugely problematic place to put a garment because it doesn't speak or move. I mean, they must have considered, I wonder if they considered the way the model would walk and move in the garment at the couture show, or they considered more the way it would sit on the mannequin in the exhibition afterwards, or these will go into store, you know, who knows when they'll get exhibited. It's a really interesting, it's very interesting.
Yeah, it just made me think a lot about all those themes, like the purpose of fashion, and whether designers are creating things just to be seen. We talk a lot about whether designers make things just to be seen flat, but it got me thinking whether they make things just to be seen still on a mannequin. It like throws up all these other...
Yes, that's what I started thinking about. And it's an amazing museum. It's done such amazing exhibitions, and I think these gowns will have a full life over the next, however, like, you know, you think about a couture client, how often they wear the piece that they commission. These garments will be 50 years still being exhibited and really keenly looked after by conservation teams, the curators, the archivists. Yeah, it puts it in a different realm, I think.
Do you like it?
It's kind of it's ingenious, isn't it? And the way the actual forms were unfolded, the gilt frames, and then hung on the wall. And then became something else, with the canvases sort of drooping out of them or swagged out of them in quite an incredible way. I mean, I was thinking about this as well with respect to, I was doing an interview with Giambattista Valli, and he was saying, through his experience of actually with his own couture, but also previously working with Mr. Ungaro, that clients used to come for couture, but they would come into the atelier with maybe a scrap of fabric that would be something from their curtains from their reception room, and say, please make me a dress for this environment, or come in with a piece of jewellery and say, please design me a dress to work around this piece. So it was very much a service. And I think now he was, you know, inferring that actually the clients come in and collect pieces as they would do art, which kind of goes back round to what role or purpose or afterlife can those designs have, which Victor and Rolf have obviously sort of, it does have a great afterlife for public viewing.
I also think it's interesting, that notion of purpose, because it also made me think, I think I was thinking about it because obviously you're shooting the couture and it's on our mind in the studio, because it also made me think that the lives that a lot of those couture garments have is in imagery or in fashion editorial or fashion film. It's not necessarily on a body, and it got me thinking about that as well, the way couture exists as a flat image and is kind of immortalised as an image. You know, if you think of the way most people know about kind of great dresses or the iconic work of certain designers, it is through flat imagery, and I found that quite interesting. It made me think a lot about that, because it's interesting to think with your work, a lot of people will know certain dresses because of fashion photography and fashion pictures. Do you think about that when you're shooting it? Big question, sorry.
No, that's fine. No, not really. It's not how I approach the work, and it's not really part of my thought process when I'm doing it. I'm aware, I guess, in a larger sense, that those images will remain, and that's how people would look at and remember those pieces. But it's not really sort of my primary motive for photographing them, or comes into how I operate. I think it's fascinating. Can I just go back? Did you see this show?
Yes.
So just tell me what Victor and Rolf were doing. Were they hanging the painting on the wall and then putting them on the girls, or were they taking them off the girls and hanging on the wall?
The girls kind of walked around with these garments on in various forms that kind of built up through the show from being, maybe first of all it was sort of skirt form and building up to sort of the grand dress idea. Victor and Rolf were actually on the set, and the girls would walk to their position.
You can kind of see it happening, and
they would then sort of unfold the garments and reconstruct them, so all the frames kind of popped back into place.
You can kind of see her doing it.
Geometric form, and then 3 of the garments were then actually hung on the back wall.
Exciting.
It is exciting, but I think it's just interesting. It makes you think about the purpose of couture, and I think we talk about that a lot on these panels, but there's so many different ways you can see it. You can see it really cynically as an exercise to sell perfume and lipstick. You can see it as, you know, a chance for designers to kind of, you know, that whole Lacroix quote about it being the laboratory of ideas, where designers can kind of do something very conceptual and very kind of about pushing what fashion can be forward. Or you can see it as about them like trying new techniques, has become a bit of a Chanel signature with the Métier d'Art show. There's so many different ways, and I think that really stood out this season of what couture means to different people.
But I can't stop thinking about these pieces and what narratives they'll tell, because I mean, I guess that's my job in the way that I would see them. And as soon as I saw this, I was like, well, what kind of exhibitions would this then end up in? What kind of narratives would these objects support? Well, they wouldn't be all on their very own unless it was a monograph exhibition, which has been done at the Barbican relatively recently. So would it be about art and fashion, the blurring of those lines? Would it be about 3D construction and the way that you build on a body and I think that's really interesting, and I wouldn't think about it with the Valentino show, but it was only because of the way they presented it, and I think it is a smart framework because it gets you thinking about larger ideas, and it could have been tacky, but it kind of, upon contemplation, becomes actually really interesting. And the fact that where they're going in their life is straight to the museum. I think that's...
Is that what's happening to them?
Yeah, that's what...
actually one dress.
Oh, just one?
Just one.
Oh, I thought it was all of them.
There's one from last season. But still, that's...
They struck a deal.
Yeah. That's quite interesting, I think, is that the rest of them, like, I don't imagine they'd be commissioned by a client. I think that's the life the predominant life of that collection will be the garments that go to that museum and exist there.
And Victor and Rolf stopped their ready to wear, is that correct?
Yeah, they stopped their ready to wear.
So this is for this season, this is all we see from Victor and Rolf.
Which is so interesting, because I think when other designers have stopped ready to wear, so Jean-Paul Gaultier would be the opposite example with this, I think part of it is obviously the perfume, and obviously that's a massive thing for Victor and Rolf because that Flower Bomb perfume was like ridiculously successful. But I think they do focus on couture very much to sell it. I think Jean-Paul Gaultier, it is to kind of, he's got clients who come in, he's got people who buy it. Whereas they've done it in a very different way, where they're not trying to kind of make beautiful dresses for women and have this kind of like much more personal niche fashion business with women that buy their clothes. It is using fashion just as their art in a way, which is kind of what this is, where it's not going to really sell to someone, but it is going to hang in a gallery.
But you can see it being bought as a kind of trophy, as you do with art works, and hung or exhibited in the house. I don't know what the collectors are doing. I think that becomes something that's never supposed to be worn, and if there is a climate for that, a changing climate, I think then that they would apply to that.
It's interesting. I don't think there's that much of a market for buying fashion pieces almost as like sculptures and artworks. I spoke to Kerry Taylor about this, and I don't want to speak on her behalf, and I don't know enough about it, but she did say that there's a huge market for kind of vintage or archive or historical fashion, but it does tend to be either collectors who kind of keep it, but very much keep it as dress, or houses buying it back for their own archives. She didn't give me the impression that there's a lot of kind of just art collectors buying it as beautiful objects to have it kind of displayed.
Well, do you think that's because we're really in the infancy as fashion is now? Its infancy. I used to work for Yohji Yamamoto, and I was very surprised when was it Barbican did their big exhibition? No, V&A did the big exhibition, and we were helping them prepare it, and we said to them, but you haven't got any of the dresses from when we used to work in sort of 86, 87.
Yeah.
So they didn't keep any.
Yeah.
Yohji Yamamoto just threw them away or burnt them or whatever happens to dresses. But so it's only recently that some of the designers have actually started taking their body of work as a sort of valuable archive.
But then in a way maybe that is a parallel to the art world, because a lot of artists destroy their artworks. They don't keep everything as obsessively as...
I always feel that fashion is a little more like photography, which really had to fight for its place. And things like Photo London has been such a success, but staged quite recently in London.
Yeah.
How long? 9 years ago or something. Photo London was a massive failure.
Yeah.
And I think that collectors have started to buy photography, take it really seriously.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful art form, and it's got a real voice, and it had to gain its own voice. And I always feel there's a huge tension from the art world with fashion. The amount of times I'm a curator. Well, what do you curate? Fashion, real roll eyes, actually abuse. And you're like, okay, yeah, cool. And at first I was quite incensed, and now I'm just like, yeah, okay, great. And I think
do you think things are changing? Do you see rolled eyes?
Pardon?
Do you feel there are less rolled eyes these days? Or?
No, not really. But I think I know better how to stand my ground. But I think it's gaining a voice. And
but the footfall that goes to the exhibitions is saying people want to see it.
Yeah. And I think that almost is one of its biggest problems, because the institution's idea is, let's chuck on that blockbuster, let's get those numbers through that door, and then let's stage like a weird contemporary art show that no one comes to.
So you don't have any of the weird fashion show. It's harder to do something that's a bit more...
It's a bit of a battle.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And the question I get asked, well, who's going to come to that? And I think you're thinking about that, but you want to share it with people too, so you don't want to do something that no one comes to.
Yeah.
It's recent history. All this is actually quite new. Things are changing very, very fast. As a little sort of anecdotal footnote, this photography we're saying is accepted as an art form now. In the 1970s, in this very building, was Sotheby's, and they held the first auction of photography as fine art here. So a nice little sort of tie-in. But so photography up until the 1970s, to be honest, in the 80s, didn't really start to earn its place, given its place as art. I think fashion is still fighting the same thing. Fashion photography had a much harder struggle. But of course, you look at surrounded by an Irving pen print now, you'll find that £500,000 is not necessarily a secure one. So a lot of these things are changing, and because of the change in our culture and the change in media and the advent of the internet, things are changing at an enormously fast rate. So I think some of these things tend to cross over into art and fashion. I'm interested. You said you don't. I think I heard you right saying you don't think art is fashion or fashion is art. So I'm always interested, because I always just say blanket, yes, I think it is. And that's sort of my sort of knee-jerk response when people talk to me about what I do and about the fashion world. I believe it's art because I believe it's about self-expression. I believe art is about self-expression. And then the argument for me, more or less. So I don't start to differentiate. So I've always considered fashion. And when you work with people like John Galliano or Alexander McQueen, and you see, or Raf Simons, and you see the the amount of thought and work and research that is poured into those collections, and you sort of get the feeling, well, they would do this whether they're getting paid or not. This is just, they can't do anything other than, this is their outburst of their artistic feeling. So I don't make any I've never really made any differentiation between art and fashion. I might be completely wrong.
I think one thing I've started to realise, because I'm kind of similar to you, I used to do that, but then I started to realise some fashion is more art than other bits of fashion, which I know sounds very obvious and was very poorly expressed then. But I think I've started to realise that, and I did think about that a lot at these couture shows, I think probably sparked by this collection, which is there are some designers who their work is so rich and so layered and so researched, and I don't think it's necessarily always about the craft, often it is about the kind of the research and the ideas behind it. And yeah, I think that is akin to art because it is about kind of self-expression, and I think about that with a lot of Raf Simons' work. But interestingly, I often find the work for his own house more akin to art than the work for Dior, even though the work for Dior is probably more elevated in terms of techniques and craftsmanship. But I feel like the work for his own house is much more about personal expression. It's much more kind of conceptual in a way.
But isn't it just like having different patrons in the arts? Some of your patrons can be more demanding of you, others a little bit let you do what you want. And I think that's very much how I'd see the sort of Raf Simons situation. With Dior is quite a heavy patron. It's like the Medici. You're going to paint that Sistine Chapel. You're going to do it how we want. It's there's certain patrons, let's say, that are more demanding of you.
And I think they are different mediums, and I think the reason I've split them is because of quite a lot of debate and discussion around curatorial work in the way that, the expertise I hold is not in contemporary art or fine art or art history, it's in fashion history. So a splitting of the two means that it doesn't make the work any less artistic and the thoughts behind it have any less weight. It's just more, I guess, from my own mind, an easier kind of way to differentiate. But I think you're absolutely right. And I always thought with McQueen, if he'd have been a painter, he would have been wonderful. If he'd have been a video artist, he would have been amazing. And I think he would have won the Turner Prize. Do you see what I mean? And I think whatever he'd have turned his hand to, that mind was so
was
strong.
his particular skill.
But it's interesting to say video artists, because it's interesting how seamlessly making a video has been acknowledged by the art world as a form of art, but making a dress hasn't. And maybe it is about intended purpose, because a collection that sells is much harder, I think, because of all the kind of notions of commerce and, as you said, like patrons and all of that. It's much harder to see that as art, whereas a collection like the Victor and Rolf Want to Go Back for It, where the intended purpose is solely the gallery, it's much easier to see that as art. I think maybe that is the problem, it's kind of intention.
It's functionality as well, like it's intended to go on a human and then be worn into the world, whereas a piece of art is in the same way. So I guess you're absolutely right that these things were easier to see instantly in that way.
But then why is hanging something on a wall so different to hanging it on a body? It's very strange, isn't it? It's kind of like
I think it's that intended purpose there, because I think at this level you can see fashion as the couture is an art form in as much as you can for furniture design or photography or ceramics. But if you're looking at a lot of ready-to-wear, it's not art, it's business. So, but there is a blurring because of the art world being more commercialized and capitalized, so it shares some characteristics more with the world of fashion. I prefer the term personally art form rather than art.
Oh, that's interesting. I think also a lot of designers probably see it differently. Like I interview, Nick interviews, we interview so many designers here. And I know lots who would categorically not define their work as art, and it's not because they're being kind of unduly humble, they just don't see it as that. They do see it as kind of clothing, and they talk about relevance, and they talk about business and real women, and then some who probably definitely would, someone like McQueen maybe that's what's interesting is the kind of different complexities and layers of it. What do we think of the Dior show, just because it's up here and looking, because this was one of my favourite shows, and I thought it was kind of a departure from what we've seen from Dior. But also I think the themes that he talks about, combining history with modernity. There was a lot of focus on costume, which I thought was really, really interesting. He talks a lot about youth and innocence and sensuality. It was just themes that I thought kind of ran through all of couture.
Any chance we could start the video from the beginning? Is that going to throw you into panic behind the control desk? It's just the first girl I think is beautiful and sums up the collection so perfectly. Apparently she's a girl that Raf found almost by chance in a Dior shop.
Oh, really?
That she'd come to Paris as a sort of young model, and her book was taking her around. She said, well, the first thing I want to see when I come to Paris is a Dior shop to get the experience of what it's like to be in a Dior shop. And he happened to be in the shop and saw her, and she perfectly epitomised this girl. That's what he was looking for that particular season. There's a lot of, if you don't mind, because I spoke to Joanne Furniss before we came on, so I know my little quotes and my little facts about it. There's a lot of reference to Flemish, both contemporary and old, so Van Dyck and Van Eyck, and Martin Margiela, who are heroes, Flemish heroes. So a lot of it is reference. A lot of it's reference to painting of the one sleeve. It's about that detail you see in the portrait. It reminded me very much, actually, of the sort of Irving Penn portrait. I think Lisa Fons Green's pen with a huge, beautiful sleeve.
That's
I thought that was very, very interesting. But a lot of medieval referencing, a lot of sort of Flemish painting, but it's from the Hieronymus Bosch painting, the Garden of Earthly Delights.
Garden of Earthly Delights.
And these are forbidden fruit that you're seeing strewn around on the catwalk. And apparently the jewellery, which is a very, very prominent part of it, it has little fruits in it and cherries in it and this sort of thing. So there's lots of sort of...
But it's interesting how the girls themselves become that forbidden fruit in a way, and he makes them look quite kind of virginal and quite sort of modest. I thought that was really interesting, because he's so obsessed with youth, but I don't think he's explored youth in that kind of like feminine way before, about kind of ideas of purity. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, well, that first girl who walks on is such a vision of kind of youthful purity. And the whole thing of the Garden of Earthly Delights, and how those panels are very different. And this is the middle panel, neither the first or the second, but the middle panel. I thought it was an incredibly beautiful collection. As much as I thought the others were, this one I thought was really, really fantastic. And just so refined and so delicate, and such a modern vision. I was really impressed when I saw it. And loved the whole thing. Sort of, incredible techniques used, and just if you look at some of those dresses which are sort of split all the way down the side, how they're joined together, and have you see the linings inside them. So, there's details which we really just miss.
Which is lovely also, that I think it's smart that you brought up that kind of the sheer aspect of some of the fact that you can see into the linings, and also there's a lot of flesh actually when you look at the real close-ups of it. And I thought that was quite interesting, just because that's something that I think we sometimes forget when we're looking at the couture very much from kind of an analytical point of view, is that it is made for, it's made for a wearer who's spent so much money on it, and I think that nod to the fact that the inside should be as beautiful as the outside, there was something quite nice in that. No, I thought it was really, really beautiful.
And you see that a lot in the collections. In the Fendi, it's there. In the Dior, it's there. In the Margiela, it's there. Chanel, it's there. It's all this incredible personal luxury that you have. That's such a gift to the person wearing it.
Were you at the show, Harriet?
No.
Did you like it though?
No, it looks absolutely beautiful. I heard it was about unbelievable degrees of humidity, hence everybody fanning
themselves.
But it's amazing the way. There's such a sense of lightness with a research and references which could be quite heavy, but his skill is it's lovely the way he just abstracts things.
And you think what I found really shocking about it was just how there is so much kind of historical costume references and all that kind of medieval stuff, and it could have looked, as you say, really, really heavy and quite cluttered, and it just looks so kind of like, it's almost quite strange when you look at real close-ups of some of the shots. It's so ornate and kind of layered in its references, but then when you see it as a show, or even just when you see it as a full look, it looks really light, and I think that's really impressive. Just because that's so modern, that kind of effortlessness.
I was asking Joanne about the shoes, because they're sort of the wedge-heeled shoes. I said, well, if you look back at those old paintings, they were wearing platforms.
That's interesting.
But it's a tribute to his heroes, both the sort of the painter and his modern hero, which is Martin Margiela. It's
interesting also, just one thing, which is, it kind of goes back to what you were saying, Shonagh, about the about Valentino in Rome, because Colin McDowell actually wrote a really good piece on the Business of Fashion, which was about Rome's history of couture, and how when ready-to-wear came up and Milan kind of became Italy's fashion centre, but different places in their fashion history. And I think that came up a lot this season as well, through the references that was in something like this but also by seeing Valentino move their show to Rome, you realise couture is much more than just Paris, which I think is something that can get forgotten quite a lot. And it just got me thinking about kind of global fashion in quite an interesting way, which was nice.
Well, yeah, Rome was very important.
Yeah, which I think a lot of people just...
In the 1960s and 70s.
Yeah, 60s and 70s.
Yeah, even earlier than that, Sorelle Fontana.
Yeah.
That now have a museum in Rome, very close, near the Spanish Steps, very close to Valentino. And I love this sort of topic, but I read on style.com that all the people in the houses above Piazza Mignelli, they all were peering out as they used to, because they always staged their shows there. And I think, didn't they move for the finale, wasn't it? They moved not very long ago, or they dabbled in Paris a bit, but often would stage. They once closed the Colosseum and did a whole performance.
Well, when Valentino started their menswear, they showed in Pitti for like I think it was either 2 or 3 seasons, and they kind of made a point that they'd found like obviously Pitti's in Florence. And I do think there's something quite interesting about it. It feels like I saw it a lot this season at the menswear. There was so much talk of like global fashion, and it was kind of in all the show notes. And then actually the couture did feel a lot more. It still felt very European, but much more of a focus on kind of actual different territories and their fashion history and heritage, and that does feel quite modern and interesting, particularly when you can talk all the time about Paris and craft, which obviously relates to a house like Chanel, but I found reflecting just on Rome as a fashion city really interesting. It's not something that you do a lot. But
La Dolce
civic pride, isn't there, as well?
Yeah.
Doesn't it make you just want to go to Rome?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And also a sense of Italian, running through the course of the veins of these gowns. Like it's a very different aesthetic, and I think that idea of Elizabeth Taylor running around the streets of Rome, you can't help but kind of indulge in those images. They had Italian fashion at the V&A, and that really was an exhibition dedicated to that Italian-ness, if you can say that.
Yeah.
Very eloquent thing to say, but...
Let's talk about a collection which I thought would come up naturally, but it kind of hasn't, which is the Margiela show, because obviously it was John Galliano's, it was his first official couture show, someone pointed out on Twitter, because obviously the first one was not technically a couture show because it was in Paris, it wasn't on the kind of Chambre Syndicale official schedule, and I thought very different to his first one. That was my initial impression. Nick, you rang up John, didn't you? And did some
I wrote to him rather than rang him up. We should probably watch it. If we're going to watch the video, we should watch it from the beginning.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that John feels very acutely is that sense of difficulty for us to criticise his shows because we're not there.
Yeah.
I think he finds that very difficult. That we're judging from catwalk photographs. We haven't got the music.
Yeah.
Can we have the music for this one?
You never know if it's the real music with streams, though, because often they can't get.
2 seconds.
Often it's like hotel lobby music.
No, don't think it's the music they played.
Yeah.
It was Marvin Gaye.
Ah.
So, a cappella, which was fantastic. And we've got all the notes to the clothing.
Yeah.
Do you want to describe any of these pieces of clothing?
Well, this is an English wool tweed from the Shires. It's boiled and cut into a jacket with Stockman shoulders, obviously Stockman Margiela reference, and details, and is draped in haste in the back, worn with bias cut dress with Moroccan pom-poms. I mean, this next look that we're coming.
What he was saying, just because the video's paused, is he was taking sort of his bias cutting, which is a sort of feminine
signature as well,
and applying it to men's fabrics, so heavy English cloth. So that's an interesting. I mean, he had. I hope I'm not being indiscreet to John. He had made himself a story for this, and I was privileged to see the story that he'd told inside his head and shown to the people at Margiela. To describe this woman, Mademoiselle Le Pigeon. And it's a whole story, it's a beautiful, poignant story. And that's what runs all the way through. The first patterns you see on the back of the dress is imprints of wet paint from a park bench, which was lying. So all those little things are all the way through.
Which is really, do you mind just turning it down just a bit, guys? Which is really interesting because when you first look at the show, because the set is so kind of pure and so removed from the kind of theatrics of the dual show, I think it felt like there was much less of a narrative.
I think actually it was a very strong story all the way through it, which is little signs and clues all the way through, little things from this story that he'd created for himself and created for the atelier.
But does that go back to the issue of communication? Because you think, and this is where I'm not sure, part of me goes, will that inform the design process? Why should I be privy to that story? But then another part of me goes, but how wonderful, wouldn't it be so nice if everyone knew about that story and everyone who watched this video could know and could have this kind of list of all the different fabrications and all the different techniques and all the different, because also one thing I found really striking about the show was all the different places that they got fabrics from. It was kind of that eclecticism that's always there in Marshall.
And always there in John's world, he's always taken from different cultures and mixing them together.
Yeah.
I really feel the secrets are my most favourite thing about his work though.
Do you?
And when you find the secrets, when you find the secrets out, then they take on a twist and turn like a narrative to understand each piece in a different way, and that's my favourite bit. And I think I'd never have known the park bench how beautiful. And you can start to imagine this woman, Marchesa Casati sort of esque, you know. I think where is she going after the bench? And I think then little glimmers of that help you. But you shouldn't maybe give too much away.
This is, just as it's passing by, this is a beautiful coat. The sort of neoprene pink and that Japanese obi at the back. It's a beautiful piece of clothing. It's really incredible in my opinion.
But maybe that storytelling, which is inherently Galliano, needs to be a privilege of the client.
Yeah, that's interesting.
To know and discover and
I don't think the story, I really hope that John doesn't mind me saying this, but I really don't think the story was for public consumption. It was for his own inspiration and for the atelier. So it wasn't ever destined to go to the public. But it does make you realise that these are not clothes that he's just a bit of this and a bit of that. You know, not only are they sort of incredibly crafted, but that's dress up photograph. But they're also, you know, they all make sense. They're part of illustrating a vision he has in his head that's been going on for 6 months.
Which is interesting to think, we're talking about narrative fashion, and maybe that is interesting to think that actually why should the narratives be for us? Actually, it's interesting to think about different designers' practices and how some designers, they need a narrative to design. Someone like, we were just looking at Ralph Simmons, and that's very much not really his practice at all. It's much more about kind of themes, and they'll come up with like 7 or 8 themes. It's really well explained in that Dior and I film. And then different people within the team will submit their references, and it's kind of built in this very, very layered way, whereas John's is so much more focused, my story, that kind of his theme. It's really interesting to think about the different ways that designers, that they manage to reach a kind of creative point.
But going back to the theatre, don't you think maybe the theatre of the new Margiela by Galliano, this is all part of the story, because in Galliano's career, at certain points, has got a lot of criticism for the theatre, and maybe, I don't know, what do you think? I mean, because I wouldn't know.
I'm a huge fan of it. I think it's very important to a modern presentation of fashion. This dress that we're seeing walking towards us now is a dress photographed at the weekend. It's a man's coat coming off the back, but actually this is the lining that she's wearing, and it's been decorated by a kimono painter from Kyoto, who John happens to know. So all these details, nobody knows these things. Very few people know. And there's such beautiful facts and such beautiful ideas. It's just such a shame. You see it's a man's coat hanging, and he's used the lining to become the dress.
Yeah, that is beautiful.
Those things I think it's a shame that the communication isn't good enough between the designer and the public in that way.
But I think that's the problem of PRs, and I think it's the way to kind of like too much focuses on kind of like the show and like seating and stuff. You actually think more focus should be on kind of like the actual communication of what each garment is about, and that can be done discreetly and with kind of sympathy to what the designer wants to reveal and what they don't want to reveal. But it goes back to what we were saying about the Valentino, just the number of hours, like it helped bring that garment alive. Like you could tell from looking at that it was a potato sack, but actually knowing that it's an American vintage potato sack bonded with French silk velvet and recycled plastic embroidery, you just think of it differently and you understand it better.
Isn't there really simple ways, like on Instagram, to tell the little tale? Like take a there must be a conscious thing not to do that. Maybe.
I do think it's pace though. I think there's
it's just moving on
I do think it is, and I think also designers are so busy. I think it's really hard to get access to them. Like I think often, I often speak to people who work within the teams of design houses, and they don't see the collection until, like, often you'll speak to like the UK head of PR, and they have genuinely not seen the collection while they're sitting you in the show. Event. Yes. Exactly, and you think, how can they then adequately say? Well, it does seem foolish, because you think if that PR had seen the collection, when you a journalist walk in and they know it would be relevant to you for whatever reason, they could say, this is particularly suited to you, or I've thought about this, it might relate to you in this way. But I think it's.
I mean, the collection like this merits serious analysis and a serious looking at it. I would put a public plea out to the PRs, the brands. we review all the shows. You need to send us information so we can review them with an informed eye. It's no good getting upset if we review a show, we don't know what we're looking at if you haven't sent any information.
But it's the same as at the shows though. Often the show notes that you do get, in a way I sympathise with the designers that don't do it. They're so poorly written, they're so kind of short and kind of strange abstract, exactly that. And what does happen is kind of some relatively lazy journalism where people will distill a collection down to like the first 2 inspirations that they read in the show notes. So I understand the reluctance to give information, but I think this kind of information we have here, you know, look by look, detailing and fabrication is really relevant.
And this is the traditional way that couture houses would relate the collection. It would be materials, silk fly, you know, not necessarily the number of hours, but very few create running orders now.
No, they
accessible to the press.
Which is a pace thing, because I've asked, I kind of, one of my friends is a very young menswear designer and I kind of help him out and give him advice and stuff, and I said, oh, it would be a really great thing you should do because such of his focus is on tailoring and technique and fabrication. But the problem is a stylist comes in often the day before and can change a look up and change the order round, and you know, you don't quite know what if a model drops out, or what if you don't put a look in, or what if something gets kind of like, you decide to cut it the day before. And I think you could say, yes, all these teams need to be more organised, but I think the pace of fashion when you're doing that many shows, and stylists are busier, everyone's busier, models are busier, it's much harder to kind of have a set running order, which maybe does come back to something like social and doing it kind of retrospectively or
on demand.
Yeah, exactly. It's really strange though, I think, that communication.
I think also there's a slightly difficult relationship between the designer and the image maker.
Yeah.
I photographed just week before last a beautiful dress by Comme des Garçons, by Haute Couture, Comme des Garçons, which was white, part of that last collection, and I made it black. Because I've made it really very dark, and I remember the stylist saying to me, well, that's worrying, Ray will hate that. You really shouldn't do that, because that's quite a difficult thing for her, because she's made a white dress, she doesn't want to see it as a black dress. And I'm thinking, well, I get that, but this is now my vision of her dress. You know, this is now you've handed over to me, and I think there's, you know, especially for Comme des Garçons, there's quite a lot of control over the imagery of their clothes, because Ray feels so strongly, she puts so much effort into these clothes. She doesn't want to see them with anybody else's clothes, and all that sort of thing. She doesn't want to see them changed. I think there has to be a better relationship between the sort of, you know, this side of it, the way that we as artists express ourselves and talk about the clothes and show the clothes, you know, in a wider context than just a fashion show. I think there has to be better relationships there.
Which is interesting, because actually that's one thing, and I love Margiela under John Galliano, but I do think Margiela, when it was the team designing it, they did do that for all their couture stuff very well. They sent out lists with all the really interesting information and where each thing had come from, and it kind of bridged that gap, as you say, between the designer's vision. But maybe that was easier to do when it wasn't. It's interesting what you say about Ray Kawakubo, because I think sometimes when it's one designer, it's harder to kind of put forward all that information in case it's misinterpreted, or because it's so much more kind of that emotional connection when it's one person's creation. I think when it's a team, it's sometimes easier in a way to communicate about it, because there's less of that kind of like, there's not less heart and soul in it, but there is less kind of.
I just think there's a slightly difficult relationship here, because, you know, in the magazines, you know, sometimes you're just not allowed to mix a look. So you can't put Gucci with a Saint Laurent, for instance. I mean, I'm saying that, I have no idea that's true or not, but for example, it is true.
Yeah.
So those sort of things, which I think is stifling creative fashion photography or fashion image making, and that can't be good. Surely, you know, both the designers and the magazines and everybody else benefits from. If you want to work with a great photographer, like whoever you care to mention, you need to give them the freedom to express themselves. And that sometimes, and with great stylists, you need to give them the freedom to create.
I think a lot of responsibility lies with the stylists who work on those big, for those big clients though, because you think those stylists had to start somewhere, and the reason they got, and the designers, I guess, the reason they got so good was that the flexibility to try things and make mistakes and mix things up, and it is going to damage a whole generation of kind of young visual people who are whether stylists or designers, because if they can't have that same kind of like, you always talk about like Melanie Ward or whoever, you know, mixing vintage with this dress and being able to do that, and that's really contributed to why she was so good, or why, you know, when she went on to work with Helmut Lang, that was so good. And you think if you're not letting young creatives have that kind of like freedom.
I'm quite surprised how that attitude seems to have changed within magazine culture.
Yeah.
I didn't get that at all when I used to work in sort of the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s. Now, even we're working with great stylists like Amanda or Harlick or Simon Foxton, people who are showing the best stylists in the world, will say, you can't mix those looks up. We have to have a total look. Yeah. And that's just a plate of advertising.
The weirdest thing is
the same thing as doing an
it's absolutely commonplace now to demand total look.
It's quite young brands do it. I think JW Anderson now you have to shoot full look. It's really, it like goes right down to the younger.
And I think that you might be able to slip in a vintage something or a white T-shirt just to kind of give it maybe a different character. But in terms of a warring brand, absolutely no.
The saddest thing is the most flexibility now is with the e-retailers because they refuse to style things full look, obviously because they style from their buy. And brands do try. I had a conversation with a big online retailer and I think it was actually Saint Laurent that tried to say you must style it full look. And they were like, we don't do that with anyone because we style it to make it most appealing to our shopper. And my takeaway from that was how worrying that actually e-retail is the only platform where these clothes can be styled however they want, because they try and make it look accessible to the consumer, so they'll style like a kind of crazy jacket with, I don't know, like a lovely black pair of trousers or something, because but then actually there is more creative freedom in that, and I just thought how worrying. And it's interesting I spent a lot of time going on Net-a-Porter or Matches or whatever and having a look and realising actually, they're doing whatever they want with those clothes, but then in the magazines that are meant to be the most creative thing, they're shot as they came out. It's so strange. But
as an outsider to all that, I think it's deeply weird.
Yeah, it's so weird.
There's not a healthy system in magazines.
No, it's not healthy. No.
Not at all. There's a whole point system that they use. If you go through, the advertisers will go through the magazines. Okay, it's the point thing. We've got a full look here. That's 1 point. Half a look. Sorry, that's half point. And you're giving your advertising based on that. It's a nasty relationship.
With younger people, they commission shoots to get the points up. Yeah. So they'll say, here's what's left. And you've got stylists working with these freaky objects and trying to make a coherent story.
But it's a really
your youngest just doesn't gel.
Oh, it doesn't, and they don't think it does.
But you can see that as the funnest game to play with the style mags, especially, is spot the shoot where they have to jam the advertisers in, and it will be like this weird shoot, kind of at the back of all the shoots, where there's like a lot of like Miss 60 in it or something like that, and you're like, right. Really, really strange. But actually, when you think if designers had total freedom, like or stylists had total freedom, like someone like your Katie Englands or your Alison Mackers, they could probably put like some heinous pair of like denim jeans and put it with some amazing couture and make it look really amazing. But when you're kind of shoehorning credits in, it just becomes so. But I wonder also, it worries me because I think a lot of fashion's audience are aware of that now, but in some ways they're not, and I feel like it's a kind of a lie then to propose that this is the most exciting vision that we think of this season, because it's obviously not. It's just a repetition of a look. It's not in any way kind of respectful to the reader.
I don't think the reader knows.
Do you not?
No, I don't know. What do you think?
No, I don't think
bubble.
It's
We're in a bubble.
Yeah.
I only know that because of my friends that work in the industry. I don't think I'd know otherwise.
I don't think it's common knowledge that the editorial world of a magazine is almost totally dominated by the advertiser's control.
Yeah.
And that's how magazines exist.
Yeah.
I think that relationship is insidious and close to cronyism. Yeah. So I think it's very bad, and it will change because, as you say, the e-retailers, people like Matches and all the big ones, are now actually becoming the real place where you see fashion, buy fashion. The magazines are again sidelining themselves. Yeah. Which they've chosen to do. They are magazines which are there to support fashion image making. So instead of having 2 weeks to make a great series of pictures, they give you a day. Yeah. That's not supporting fashion image making. That's running it into the ground. And if they don't stop doing that, they won't exist. They're their own demise.
Which is what is weird about the e-retail thing, because a lot of people make kind of disparaging comments about big e-retailers starting magazines, and Porter magazine started or what have you, and the merging of editorial and retail. But in a way, you think at least editorial in that context does have a bit more kind of bite back and power, because the relationship is flipped. It's no longer advertiser dictating editorial. No. When the editorial's connected to retail, they've actually bought that designer's collection, so it kind of weirdly puts
it's their own possession, it's their own inventory.
Yeah, it's really interesting, that kind of power relationship, and you do wonder. It's really sad to think that e-retailers who have magazines could probably have more flexibility and more freedom, and those will become more creative spaces than kind of, because there's quite a lot of loftiness between people, amongst people who don't work for a magazine tied to a retailer, because they're like, we have freedom, and you're like, well, but you don't. It's really, really strange. Anyway, that's a very big topic. Should we go back a little bit to the couture?
Let's look at our couture.
A lot of people we haven't talked about Fendi, which I would really like to, because Fendi was a real talking point for lots of different reasons to all the topics we've discussed, which was we were talking about it in the studio and on the panel we did alongside the show, and saying that fur really is kind of one of the last taboos in fashion. I think it's one of the last kind of controversies, and obviously Fendi aren't usually on the couture schedule, but did this kind of one-off presentation, which Karl Lagerfeld has been quite clear, or kind of clear in being cryptic, by saying that it might not happen every season, or maybe it will. He made some kind of
that's clear.
Well, that's what I mean. He was clear by message. Being kind of.
It might or it might not.
Yeah, exactly. But he made that point.
Clear that up.
I think he didn't want to promise that it would happen every season, but he didn't want to say that it wouldn't. And he made some kind of quite flippant comments about how there wouldn't be enough skins in the world to do it each season, blah blah blah, which I think caused a bit of controversy. What's interesting though, he did make the point that in the 80s, like, you'd have a coat that would finish a show that would have kind of like various different sort of stable pieces in it, and now actually you're lucky to have one coat like that in a show. And he made the point of how these skins are so much harder to access. Have
you ever seen the fur collections? Like Galliano's fur collections are amazing.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah,
they're on YouTube. But
it's interesting, isn't it? I found it.
They're weird. They're for like a fur manufacturer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the fur is a textile.
Yeah, yeah. I was intrigued by how much controversy there was around this show, because there were real kind of protests outside and a lot of kind of real anger towards it. And it's strange because I think, and maybe this is me in my fashion bubble, but I've seen so much fur on the runways so much over the last few seasons. It's such a big trend. But maybe it was just the kind of the ostentatious thing of her doing a whole show based around it. What were your thoughts on it, Harriet?
I'm interested that actually all these Fendi's fur is known for its glorious colours and kind of patchworks and effects, which one can never see from here at all. But it's just very interesting on a very straightforward level that these opening looks are all very brown, minks and sables, which is kind of like what you used to think about fur before it became highly coloured and more fun and more fashion.
But I wonder if that was a real focus on trying to make it look real, because I think the thing with that coloured fur is because fake fur has become so good, when you see coloured fur you sometimes think it's fake fur, whereas actually when you looked at this it was so obviously a real animal, which was kind of quite shocking. But I wonder if that was part, and also I think because it was the 50-year anniversary of Karl Lagerfeld working with Fendi, I wonder if it goes back to kind of what we're talking about with Valentino. There was this kind of attempt to kind of do a bit of a greatest hits, a bit of a nod back to the archive, a bit of a sense of kind of time passing. It's a strange one. You didn't shoot fur, do you?
No,
not really.
As principle, I don't shoot fur. Every so often you'll find a piece of fur gets into the stylist's wardrobe, so I do shoot it, but I won't ever do a fur campaign.
Yeah.
And I try and avoid it when I can. I remember being very upset when I used to work for Yohji Yamamoto, and a fur piece came out. I got myself into such a state that I didn't know what to do. My loyalty to Yohji Yamamoto and my desire never to shoot fur. It's quite tricky, but it's very, very hard to maintain that. And you do end up shooting fur, or sometimes without being aware of it, and sometimes it's very hard just not to.
Yeah.
So I try and do it. I try not to do as much as I can, and I don't do it much. And I don't ever accept fur campaigns. There's a whole debate around fur, and I have total sympathy for people who think it's cruel and think it's an awful thing to do, and I would engage in that debate too. However, I think we might miss the point of this collection if we spend too much on that particular debate, although it's totally pertinent and totally right to have it. And one could, by simply putting different arguments in there, suggest that perhaps we should also consider how much some of the animals they use for these pelts, how much they exist in the wild if they weren't farmed. Now, I'm not saying this, and I'm really not wanting to defend the fur industry at all, but there are always different sides to debates, and I think only unintelligent people will not listen to both sides. And there is some thought that some of the animals, their existence is maintained because they're farmed. I don't know the facts and figures behind that. And I think there are some awful things that happen to animals, and I think I have complete sympathy with people who feel that way. However, I don't think we should spend our time discussing the Fendi collection in those terms. I think it's a debate that we can't solve here. And I think we should look at putting that to one side and agreeing that it is a debate, we should then have another debate or another look at this collection.
But I think that's what's weird about it though, because I do agree with you, but I felt aesthetically this collection like revelled in that debate, and I felt like a lot of those garments were made. Like I feel like we've kind of missed them, but if you jump back a little bit, there were those looks where she was wearing such a long stole, like such a long kind of scarf, that it really like dragged behind her on the runway, kind of in this like odd way where it seemed to be kind of like deliberately ostentatious. Like this one, you can see how from the front it doesn't look that long, but when you see them from above, and it felt like, and Karl Lagerfeld, we talked about this with Chanel, he's a very witty designer, and he does like to be provocative and irreverent and quite naughty. And like, look at that, I felt like it was trying to make a point about kind of almost like wastefulness, almost deliberate kind of, this something so precious as fur, and that a life has been lost, but it's just kind of dragging along the floor, and it's so long. I feel like in a way maybe they don't want us to analyse it outside of that debate, and maybe that debate is part and parcel of the kind of aesthetic of this collection. That's how I read it. I think that is probably just my interpretation, but I think how can you not look at that and think he's trying to make a point about...
I did feel there's a deep feeling of excess there.
Yeah.
It's so decadent.
It's so decadent. But also I just think the way to have something dragging on the floor, particularly when it's a dead animal, I think there's something quite, it's not political, but it's vaguely kind of, I think it's making if all the looks had looked like that, I'd definitely say, it's removed from that debate, or we should at least try and see it. But there were so many looks where it felt like, just look, it's like this kind of carcass being dragged along.
It's that very 1980s feeling, isn't it? Dragging your fox fur along the...
Yeah, exactly, along the ground. And it's the same, they once did a fur runway. I went to a men's show where it was goat, but it was still, and it was kind of, I wrote about it in the review, and I said that I thought it was really awful, and the PR kind of rang, was quite agitated about it, and I thought that was done for a reason. That was done for those comments. Obviously it was, and I wonder.
I don't think it is, Lou, with respect. And again, it's very hard to have this debate because it's very hard to talk about this out of that debate.
Yeah.
But to some degrees, I think we should, and then we can have the debate about fur or not fur. But from what I know about Karl Lagerfeld designing and the House of Fendi designing, that's not their intentions.
Really?
So I wouldn't see any reason why that would be their intentions. This is a mixture of feathers and fur together. These are different techniques they're trying. The edges, the ends of the fur are tipped with metal. There's lots of different things going on here. I can't see for the life of me why Karl or the Fendi family would want to engage in debate about the use of fur and decadence of using fur and the right or the wrongs of using fur. I don't see that would be a useful debate.
I think maybe I'm very cynical. I just think how much press that got them.
I don't see that we're getting the right sort of press. I don't think they would court that sort of press. I mean, I wouldn't. You wouldn't want to have bad press written about you about a subject which you don't.
And it's not very haute couture, is it, to have that sort of?
So I don't think it's that. I think the other things that are going on. I felt some of the silhouettes in it were old looking.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's where the idea of this sort of you're picking up on, which is the idea of this rather heavy, kind of, sort of very animal-like shapes for the material they're using come across. But I think that's because the hand at Fendi isn't that new.
Yeah.
So I think it's an old house, and I think to some degree it's not that new. But I think he was actually trying to make the fur look lighter. Yeah. So he's sort of cutting into it, and as I say, mixing it with feathers. And there's techniques that have never been done before.
Yeah. So some of them were amazing. Like one coat, I can't remember how much it was. It was like something crazy. I think it was like 3 million or something, and it was all like gold on the mink or so. It was kind of amazing.
I had no idea how much these things cost. I was talking to someone about it last night, and neither she or I knew how much actually these things retail for. Yeah. You think they're £3 million?
There was one. Can you have a Google? There was one particular coat in the collection. It was. I should have revisited this before, and it was a mink brown coat, and I think it was like gold around each piece of fur, and it was something nuts, like it was like $1 million or something. I remember just looking at me like, that's nuts. Have a look if you can find it. But do you think there is a place for fur on the couture runways to do that? Because they did push that it was a fur show, it wasn't a couture show with fur in it. Is that something that is important to having in couture, kind of not as Nick says, kind of moving outside of the fur debate, but also is it quite interesting to see shows in couture that showcase different techniques? Because as much as you can, putting aside what people think about fur, it's kind of, you could put this alongside someone like Iris van Herpen, who does a whole show that's about 3D printing, so it's kind of shows about specific techniques or textures are quite interesting.
I think it constantly needs to have new ingredients or the ones that are relevant, and maybe Fendi will only show for the winter edition once a year. You constantly need to kind of take in and embrace new designers who measure up to that extreme level of technique and craft and delivery.
There's a lot of people who are kind of changing couture up who we haven't spoken about, people like Boucheron Zara, who I think does amazing stuff and making couture very kind of relevant and wearable. We also haven't talked about Elie Saab, we haven't talked about Armani, which was a weird one because Armani was kind of an ode to Schiaparelli when we had a Schiaparelli collection with a new designer there, so that was kind of all a bit strange. And were you at the Schiaparelli show? No, what do you think of it? Because obviously it was the first collection by Bertrand Guillon after Marco Zanini moved on, and it was a strange collection in some ways. I didn't think it was as perhaps not as punchy as what Marco Zanini was doing there, and much more in step with Valentino, where Bertrand Guillon actually was.
Very contained, very proper.
Yeah.
Very, very great use of all the motifs and iconography from Schiaparelli, and very wearable.
Yeah.
Very good, very neat, and precise and kind of excellent.
It's strange with Schiaparelli though, because you think, someone on the panel said something which I thought was really smart, because we did a panel alongside this show. They said, if she was designing today, what would she make? And it definitely wouldn't be that. And I couldn't get that out of my head. And I did think it's kind of a different way of interpreting the archive. We often talk about kind of embracing the codes of the house, and I think this did in a very expected way because there were lots of the motifs, but is another way to embrace the codes of the house, think about what that designer would do if they were alive, which is funny because Olivier Rousteing of Balmain, when I interviewed him here, he said that he felt like if Balmain himself was making Balmain today, Balmain would be what Olivier is doing, because it's like jet-setty and it's all of those things. And I thought that's really, really interesting. And I started to think about that with Schiaparelli. Did you like the show, Shonagh? Because obviously it's a house. I wonder if is she a kind of design that curators love, because there's so much kind of codes.
Yeah, you will get curators that are really obsessed with Scap.
Yeah.
Like really. But I don't have a permanent collection, so I don't hang around with historic garments all the time, so I have less of a kind of less ability to fall in love. Like they'll be like, oh wow, like Vionnet or Schiaparelli or I don't know. I thought it was neat. I think it's a really good word actually for it. It seemed tight and tidy, but I agree that I don't think that would be what she would be doing now. Yeah. So when you put it, I feel a bit kind of. That swayed my opinion a little bit.
Yeah, sorry.
Saying that.
It was someone else's stolen opinion.
No. But I think it's a really, really hard thing to live up to. She was a real innovation, and she was a really strong personality, and she had a very strong vision. She was extraordinary. She was an extraordinary person.
And a collaborator.
History. And a collaborator. And with it picking up on a zeitgeist, she was really tapping into important artists of the day.
When you say collaborator, do you mean a collaborator with the Nazis, or do you mean she collaborated with other artists?
She collaborated with other artists.
Just wanted to clear that up.
Chanel was the Nazi one.
Oh.
I sort of missed that. I don't know where we came with that.
I think I know what you mean, but I just want to check that that's...
No, it's like all her work with people like Dali and everyone who...
Which is...
It's strange because you look at it and you think that's... We just had that huge discussion about art and fashion. You think that's so in the air, why aren't they operating like that today? You think if they made themselves the house that did all these interesting collaborations and partnerships, that would feel so in keeping with the history, but also so of the moment.
But do you think we're in a bit of a bubble with fashion? Because I was saying, we were just talking about it. I went to see the Wayne McGregor, Olafur Elias and Jamie XX performance at Manchester International Festival. And I just thought, I wish I'd have come up with that trio. Like I never would have, but I never would have.
Yeah.
We don't do that kind of thing at Somerset House, but wow, that's killer, and it was amazing. And I just thought, are those kind of innovations happening here? I don't know. They're not communicated if they are.
Yeah.
So well as that, but that's very neat. You go to that performance, you know what each individual's done. But I did think it was interesting. The clothing wasn't really a focal point in that performance. But I don't know, like Gareth Pugh's working so interestingly with Wayne McGregor and Ruth Hogben, for example. That builds a really interesting trio and very sharing. But I think something like this it's very straight what it's setting out to do. Yeah.
Did he reference Lee Bowery? I read in the...
it said he referenced Lee Bowery, but I didn't see it.
I didn't get that.
that much apart.
Well, there was a first outing, you know, who knows what's down the pipeline.
Yeah.
And maybe they need to test the waters.
I think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think also what kind of, I feel very much, I've said this already, but I just feel like they don't know what they're trying to do with that house. I get that impression they're not sure what there's trying to happen, and so I think it's really hard to design a collection because I don't know what grounds I'm meant to analyse this on. You know, when you look at certain collections, like when you look at a Giambattista Valli collection, you kind of know what it's about and you see it within that framework, whereas with this I don't know what framework to put it under. Am I seeing it as Schiaparelli, or am I seeing it as a revival of that name, but this is just meant to be about, you know, bringing in new clients into couture and that's it? Or is this the beginning of a conversation where Schiaparelli is completely revived and we see the whole house alive again? So it's very hard to kind of know how to critique it because you're not sure who it's for or what it's about, which I think is, maybe that makes it, in a way, it just gives you carte blanche to critique it how you want, but I think that's the problem with it, is I just don't know what the intended purpose is with reviving that house. But
I do think it's a sort of interesting point is when you revive a house like Schiaparelli, you know, are you trying to get something back of her, or are you using something new? What's the relevance of the name anymore to the designer?
Particularly with her, because I think she is forgotten outside of the fashion pack a bit, you know, unfairly, but I don't think it's a name that a lot of people know.
But should the designer be trying to engage with what she did? I find this a debate. I don't come down easily on either side of the debate. I kind of think they probably shouldn't. I think they should just do something brilliant if they've been chosen by the house.
But then why revive the name at all? Why not just do it under their own name? That's the weird thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting area.
I guess there's been an investment in the name, and there's a determination to make it work.
Yeah.
But it was such a different time.
Yeah.
You know, when she was alive, it was a different time.
And it was so of its time, her design as well. So those codes sometimes don't feel relevant today. So it goes back to what we're saying, should it be about aesthetic nods or should it be about ethos nods? And it's quite confusing, isn't it?
I'm a great sort of believer we should do things that are right for our time and not harp back. It was an awful Quinn and Terry development in Richmond where they built something on the riverfront and sort of aimed back to sort of, you know, what it was 200 years ago, and you're thinking, but it's got a car park in it. You know, Quinn was telling us, well, you know, if I was designing 200 years ago, but you wouldn't have been designing a car park. So you wouldn't have been. You can't just have this sort of, this is what she would have done if she was alive now type thing. Well, she's not alive now. It's a different time. When she was alive, she's subject to a whole different range of influences. You know, the Nazis were about to overrun Europe. It was a dreadful time. It's a different time. There are different things happening. And I don't think you can take people's artistic responses to the events that are happening in their lifetime and then say, okay, she would have done this if she was alive now. She might have done something completely different.
Yeah. No, that's very true. Have you managed to find the fact? I think it was either on 10 Magazine's Instagram or the Sunday Times Styles Instagram. I'm like determined to get to the bottom of it.
What are you trying to determine?
The Fendi coat price. I just want to remember. Is there anyone we've missed? Is there anyone else that's stood out? We haven't talked about Versace. We haven't talked about Giambattista Valli. Have we got any more general points to make about this season? Was it a strong couture season? Were there shows that really kind of... It's thrown up a lot of debate and a lot of diverse debate. Maybe that's what marks a good couture season. Did you enjoy being there? Did you feel like it was a strong
Well, I was
season?
actually only there for one show.
Were you?
Yes,
okay, so you just had
I wasn't there for the event. But I think what was interesting in terms of the week and the way that it was planned, particularly this edition, it's been webbed in with the fine jewellery shows. And also webbed in with quite a big ingredient of beauty events. So Giambattista had a party for his collaboration with MAC and his 10th anniversary. Victor and Rolf had a party for Flower Bomb. There was a big Lancôme 80th anniversary. So as a sort of series of 4 or 5 days in Paris, plus there were resort collections, it gelled together lots of different threads and gave more people more reasons to go there. Which was really interesting, I think, in terms of how it operates within the industry.
The cynics would point to all those tie-ups with the cosmetics as quite a kind of apt thing when a lot of houses, you know, the couture show is just an extension of advertising for that. Particularly with kind of Victor and Rolf, it's funny what we were saying about the perfume and then such a big celebration of the perfume. And
I don't think it is cynical. It's just it's reality. It's business. It's fine.
I also get that as well. Like, you know, you've got to keep the art going somehow. I mean, I think that we are in different times too. You know.
Yeah, I interviewed Gareth Pugh once and he said that. He was talking about how when he did the New York show and it was sponsored by Lexus and people were a bit snobby. I think some other designer must have said something to him or something, because obviously he got his goat that day. And he was like, there's nothing wrong with like taking money. And he was like, it's not like I did it for a free car. He was like, but they gave me money to do something I'd always wanted to do that I never could have done. That was like a vision I had. It's fine. And I kind of like...
Yeah, it's just a funny sort of attitude the fashion industry seems to have, is in some ways a very sort of almost say they don't want to make any money out of it, as if that sullies it in some way.
Yeah.
You don't have that in the film industry or the or the
product placement.
I mean, it's all, we live in a capitalist society. It's all about making money.
Yeah.
We want to fight against that.
Yeah.
But in a capitalist society, that's what it's about.
Yeah.
And the transactions, the business transactions that go on for this, I think it's fine. It's no different. We don't criticise the coal industry.
In a way, it was more. If it was more out in the open, you wouldn't have that awful thing where there's that weird creativity commerciality divide where people are like, oh, but this is to make money, so I have to make it like this. This is just for pleasure, so it can be really good. Actually, if they were more out in the open, people would hopefully do really good stuff to make money. It would be less that weird, this is a job, but this is an editorial. There's such that kind of big divide, isn't there, which is strange.
Yeah, it shouldn't dilute the creativity, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem for me in it.
Yeah.
Where the business is actually used just to make the most possible money at the expense of the creativity.
Yeah.
Whereas actually sort of, that's what they need to be doing. They need to be putting some of the money back into making the creative part of fashion industry, which is what people love about it, and the reason we're all sitting here. That's what they need to invest into.
Yeah.
So I think that's a shame. But I think the fact that those dresses cost a lot of money and we sell a lot of perfumes and all those sorts of things, well, that's part of commerce.
How did you find shooting on the couture?
I didn't shoot that much of it, sadly. I shot only a little bit of it. I shot John's incredible dress, which is beautiful to photograph. I mean, they are incredible for an image maker. They're incredible pieces to photograph. We looked at shooting the Versace, but didn't. The Dior came and went before we got a chance to shoot it.
Really?
We're shooting in Britain, so the Dior arrives at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and leaves at 4 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
If you happen to be shooting something else at that point,
Yeah.
it just goes. You can't. Sadly, you can't hold on to it.
Yeah.
So I didn't shoot a lot of it in the end, which is a great shame. Because some of these pieces of clothing are so beautiful and really deserve to be photographed. I love photographing.
Yeah. I always want we should do a project on Show Studio where we do something with them all turned inside out. That would be pretty cool as well. Well,
a lot of them, I think I'm going to get this wrong, but I think it's a Dior that's reversible.
Yeah.
So actually, the linings that can be used, you can just they're reversible. I think this expression I'm groping to try and say again. So I think and then John's using the linings as dresses, and so it's.
Well, it was a good season, wasn't it? It's given us lots of topics. we've all kind of talked about how beautiful all the dresses are and how much work goes into it. So it is more appropriate than ever to give all the designers a round of applause and all the petit man a round of applause to wrap things up.